How's it going, guys? Apple here today. This is part 13 of learning how to code in C++. Today we're going to be talking about vectors. I'm going to break this down to two parts, mainly because vectors are a lot more complex than the other stuff than I have talked about in this series. Basically, all a vector really is a form of storing information. But in order to actually use vectors, we need to actually import it. So how we do that is do hashtag include, and then we just type in vectors, vector, and essentially now we are able to actually be using vectors. So the way of formatting vectors is pretty simple. We use these double slashes as a type of standpoints. First of all, you type in vector, and then using these two little arrow points. And in these arrow points, we just put our data type, and then after we put the name of the vector. Simple as that. That's basically the format of vectors. So let's go ahead and make our first vector. So from this basic format, we just type in vector, and then we have our data type. Let's just say int for simplicity reasons, and then the name of the vector, and let's just call my underscore vector. And then of course we end it with a semicolon. So right now we have a empty vector. Let's go ahead and actually fill this up with certain information for it. So we gotta put out the my underscore vector, and then put a dot, and then we could see a bunch of these functions that we could actually put to our vector. What we're going to use right now, and only explain right now, is we're going to be using the pushback. So essentially what basically a pushback is just we're putting information into our vector, and we then use our parentheses to put information for it. And since from our data type is an integer, we basically have to put a whole number in those parentheses. Let's say 15342 as our whole number, and then we use a semicolon at the end since this is C++. So let's go ahead and print this vector. What I'm gonna do is do cout, and then we're gonna say my underscore vector, and then use that colon, and then for the end of it we're gonna put basically end L, and basically what NL is just inline. It's the same thing as the /n I talked about before. And for our middle part, we're basically going to be making a for loop. So what we got to do is make an unsigned integer for this for loop. And the reason why, what we want to do to actually print this statement, basically print our vector, is we got to use an unsigned integer. Now basically what an unsigned integer is basically a number, a whole number that is not negative. Basically that sign in front of the number, like a plus sign or a minus sign, it has no of that. It doesn't have that. So then it would not be able to have any negatives. And then what we're gonna do is have I is less than, and then we're gonna put down my vector dot size, and then we're gonna use these parentheses for it, then a semicolon, and then finally of course we're just gonna have I plus plus as our final point. And now we're ready to actually print this. So what we're going to do is make a cout, and then of course those arrows, and then my vector. Now I'm going to be using these brackets, and all these brackets are really is just, they're really meant for arrays and lists. I'll be talking about that later, not now, but all it really is, an array really is just basically a list for simplest terms. We're going to add our semicolon. And then what we're going to do, pretty much to make it a little bit more neater, is add these semicolon, add these arrows, and then we're just going to add this space. And when we run this code, we should just get my vector and then the number of the vector. As we can see here, my vector, it is printed right here. My vector, I probably should have added a space right there, make it look a little bit more neater. And then right here, we basically state, hey, this is we want to print out our vector. And then we just have it right here. That's our vector, basically number for this entire program. And then when we execute it, it prints out the number because we have this printout statement of it. Now right here is basically pretty much everything. And if I really have the number in this array, if I have it as it'd be the same thing of an execution, of course, right there. So we could add more numbers into our vector. Of course, it's just really this. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this number, well, this line of code multiple times, and just put down, making it a little bit more different from all of them. And then we execute our program. As we can see here, we have all the numbers that are printed out. Basically, this is why the space is really useful, because it keeps the number separated from other numbers so it doesn't overlap. Pretty much we understand what vectors are, but there are certain functions in a vector that I would say you guys really should know. Let's go ahead and type in my vector, then dot. And of course, as we could see here, we could see a bunch of different functions for it. Let's just put down pop back for our one. And we just need to add these parentheses and then a semicolon at the end. Now, what's interesting about pop back is it gets rid of the number basically last used. I'm gonna get a little bit more complicated on the next video and explaining more about this, but basically it really determines on what type of what way are you storing the information. For example, I'm just gonna go over two right now. Stack, and then I believe it's called quote. Basically, how you could think of a stack is basically the first number is on the bottom. Imagine you're putting stuff in a box, right? You're putting books in a box, and then you put this number first, and then this next number second, third, fourth, fifth, and then you gotta take out one thing. So you gotta take out one book, and that's the closest book, so you take out this number. This is essentially a stack type of way. That's basically the default. So when we run the program, we could go ahead and see what it really does. Basically, our first one's right here, and our second one's right there, and third one, and then our fourth one, but we're missing a fifth one. That's mainly because that pop back took out that fifth one of it. And we could change this into different spots, and it'll actually have different outcomes. Basically, it's first in, last out. You put something first in, and then you put a second number in. That second number takes out if you have a pop back function. So if we say, hey, I want to add this to this line of code, let's go ahead and print it and see what happens. Now we only get 3 numbers. So when this number is put in, and then this number is put in, and then we call this to take out this number, essentially because it's a stack, it will take out that number, and then it'll keep on pushing in this and this and that, and then we have another takeout, and then it'll take out this. And essentially that's really all vectors really are. In the next episode, I'm going to be talking about a little bit more about vectors, of different types of functions they have. Before I end the video, I probably should mention what a quote really is. You can think of it as a line, basically. It's first in, first out. Basically, if somebody comes in, they're the first in the line, and then the person that got to get out is the first person, so they get out of the line. You can think of it like an airport. The first one there is going to be the first one out of there, essentially. So yeah, that's pretty much what a vector really is. I thank you guys for actually watching these videos. I highly appreciate it. If you actually like the video, go ahead and leave a like. Leave a comment if you have any questions. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. See ya.